Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Karen Curry Parker, and I'm super excited to be sharing with you some brand new information about your emotions and unraveling the mystery of your emotions and the impact that our emotions have on our lives and on our physical bodies, and what you can do to start getting a deeper understanding and awareness of your emotional energy, how to leverage it as part of the most creative energy in the human experience, and how to keep your physical body healthy, well, strong, vital, vibrant. Before we get started, I just want to cover some basic information. If you are new to human design, for all intents and purposes, in this particular presentation, I will be doing my best to span different people's knowledge about human design. So I will be sharing with you some basic information and then some more complex information. If you have your chart, if you have your human design chart, it'll benefit you before we get started to go ahead and have that up and out and ready to go. So, all right. So just for the sake of introducing the human design system, human design is a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, Kabbalah, and quantum physics. So it's in the synthesis of all of these esoteric sciences, and these are, I call them sciences because some of these systems have literally been around before I think we technically had science. In particular, the Chinese I Ching has been around for thousands of years, and we've been using it as a way to study archetypes and to bring out the highest expression of who we are for thousands and thousands of years as humans. The human design chart is calculated just like you do a traditional astrology chart. So taking your birthday, your birth time, and your birthplace, using your birth information, we plug it into a computer program, it spits out a graph or a body or a chart that looks like this. We call this the body graph. This body graph is a map. It's a map that shows you your strengths, your life purposes. It shows you where you might be more vulnerable health-wise. It shows you where your wisdom is, your best decision-making skills, how you process the energy of the world around you, what you're here to do, and most importantly, how you're here to impact the world in the unique and beautiful way that only you can do. When you look at the chart, you'll see in the chart there are 9 geometric shapes. Those 9 geometric shapes are called the centers. Each center is responsible for processing different kinds of energies. The centers are loosely correlated to the Hindu chakra system. They're correlated, but they're not quite the same. You'll see there are 9 centers here. The Hindu chakra system traditionally has 7. So this is a little bit different than the chakra system. So I always tell people, don't try to go look for it, because here's the thing. The system, human design in and of itself, is really kind of a unique thing in and of itself. Today, for all intents and purposes, we are going to talk about one particular center, the emotional solar plexus. But before we can talk about the emotional solar plexus, we have to talk about just something very, very basic about the dynamics of how your chart works. So if you're new to human design or you don't have your chart memorized, go ahead and get your chart out for the next part of this presentation. What you will see in your chart is that you will have centers, those geometric shapes, that will be colored in. Some are going to be colored in, some are going to be white. It doesn't matter what color they are. Don't worry about that. Just pay attention to, is it colored in or is it white? What you'll see on the chart is that or what we oftentimes say in human design, is that the colored in sections are defined, and the white sections, and this word white got whited out on this particular slide. So where there's a big white gap next to the word open, it should say white. So in the vocabulary of human design says anything that's colored in is what we call defined. Anything that's white we call open. So just kind of hang on to that. Anything that's colored in we call white. Everything that's colored in we call defined. Anything that's white we call open. Your defined centers, which are colored in, and this is really key, so write this word down. Your defined centers operate consistently, meaning the energy that's colored in on your chart is energy that you have available to use for your own self all the time. This is the essence of who you are. This is oftentimes the feeling that people have from you energetically when you stand in their aura. This is what they feel from you. The energy in your chart that's colored in or defined is the piece of yourself that maybe you feel and sense inside. Maybe you've never really had an opportunity to live it out fully and authentically, but it's that part of you that you really feel is the truth of who you are. The white parts of the chart are open. The open centers, anything that's white, really, really white, because it doesn't even show up on the slide. Anything that's white is open. Wherever we have openness in the chart is where we are taking energy and information in from the world around us, and we're not just receiving that energy, we're actually amplifying it. The other thing that's important to remember, and again, write this word down, wherever we have openness is where we are experiencing other people's energies in an inconsistent way, meaning there's a lot of variability in how you will experience the world wherever you have openness in your chart, because you're going to be taking that energy in from different people, from different planets, from different locations, and the way you experience that energy gives you a lot of variability in your understanding of how that energy works. The cool part about that is that variability ultimately gives you wisdom about that energy. Wherever you have openness, you have potential for wisdom. So let's stop for just a second before we go on to the next slide. Let's look at just an example of the difference between openness and definition, just so that we can, I want to make sure I cement this idea, because this is a very important idea in human design. When you look at this chart, this body graph that's on this particular slide, you'll see that on the right-hand side of the chart, there's a triangle there. That triangle is called the emotional solar plexus. The emotional solar plexus is the energy center that is responsible for processing emotional energy, and is actually the topic of our conversation today. When this center is white, as it is in this particular chart, it means that you're taking in emotional energy from the world around you. And you're not just taking it in, you're amplifying it. And you're experiencing it from all the people you meet, from the places you go, sometimes even from the planets as they move. So you're always experiencing in an amplified way other people's feelings. So it makes you quite literally empathic. And it also sometimes can make it difficult for you to get a clear bead on what are you feeling, because you're always swimming in this bath of other people's emotional energies. That's how openness works. When you have it colored in, if this was colored in, it would be brown. And if it was colored in, it would mean that your emotional energy actually comes from within you, and it's got its own source within you, and it's steady and consistent, and it's not going to be varied, or the way you experience it isn't going to change depending on who you're with. It's going to be within you and sourced within you. All right, we're going to talk a lot more about this as we go through. So as I said, for all intents and purposes, today in this particular presentation, we are talking about the solar plexus center. When we are looking at the solar plexus center just from a physiological level, not from an energy perspective, physiologically, we see that our emotional energy is attached to the energy in the body for digestion, assimilation, consequently nutrition and hydration and food. It's also where the pancreas, or the energy of the pancreas, is located. So again, going back to this theme of digestion and assimilation, the pancreas is responsible for metabolizing sugars. So the pancreas, or the energy of the pancreas, is here. The kidneys, the energy for the kidneys are here. And oftentimes we'll see with this, the energy, because there's emotional energy, potential for depression. So anytime we are not using our emotional energy correctly, we have the potential to see an impact on the digestive system, and our nutritional status. Weight and weight issues can oftentimes be emotionally based. Diabetes and sugar metabolism can be emotionally based. Any issues with the kidney, and again, hydration and processing fluids in the body, and even blood pressure, because that's regulated by the kidney, can be emotionally based, and even depression obviously can be emotionally based. So we're going to be talking over the course, or I want you to at least file away as we talk about this in the beginning, that if you have any of these particular physical symptoms going on, there may be a correlation between these physical symptoms and your emotional health and wellness. That being said, I want to make a really important disclaimer. I'm talking about a system that allows you to integrate your health and wellness, the full manifestation of your vitality, with your understanding of your energy. I would never, and I'm not going to say, replace your physical medications or don't change your physical medications. This is an integrated system of health and healing and wellness. So that means that whatever we talk about today, I want you to augment with what's going on in your physical body. I'm not going to talk too much about the physical body today. I want you to see what we're talking about today as being a way to augment and to enhance your experience of health and wellness in your physical body. And certainly if you have any kind of challenge going on physically, particularly associated with these emotional energies, to not change anything physically, but to instead continue to augment or supplement what you're doing with the emotional work that I'm going to teach you about today. All right, so when we see the solar plexus, part of what makes this center so cool and so important is that it's not just about emotional energy. What I'm going to show you today is that the emotional energy within the chart energetically, first of all, is obviously important for you to feel good, healthy, well, and vital, which is my number one goal, but it's also the center for the most beautiful, delicious aspects of creativity, and they're unique, delicious, beautiful aspects of creativity that are specific to human beings and the hardwiring of human beings. What we see in the solar plexus is the potential for deep creativity. There is passion in the emotional solar plexus. There is the capacity to learn from and integrate and tell stories about our experiences in the world. There is the energy and the potential from the solar plexus to create good and juicy communities as well as sustainable resources. There is the energy for sex and sexuality in the solar plexus. There's a lot of juice in the solar plexus that can be very, very sexy. There's the energy for intimacy in the solar plexus. Also the energy for abundance and connection to source, as well as the energy for alchemy and creativity associated with visualizing, fantasy, and everything else that you can think of as related to creativity. So there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, this is the place where we are deeply spiritually connected to God. This is a place where we have the ability to use our imaginations to literally manifest what we desire in our lives. This is the place where we experience all the fun and cool parts about being human: music, poetry, passion, romance, intimacy, community. All of that stuff is located here. It's a vital, vital source of the human experience. And as such, it's also a source of what we create in life. Here's the thing that's really, really important. When we use the solar plexus, it's not just about drama. It's not just about laughter. It's not just about all of the more subtle nuances of the human experience. That energy in the solar plexus actually has an incredibly important function in terms of enhancing what you create in your reality. When we look at the solar plexus, when we look at the nerve and the nerve connections in the solar plexus, remember when we talked about physiologically where it's located, it's the gut, right? It's the gut and the kidneys and the pancreas. There is a nerve, the vagal nerve, that actually connects the gut to the heart and the mind. So the heart, the mind, and the gut are actually all connected. And what scientists are actually finding is that there's an intelligence in the gut or in the GI tract. Whatever goes on in the gut can actually influence the functioning of the heart and the brain. And that there is an alignment physiologically between these three. There's also an alignment energetically between these three, and it's a very vital and important alignment, because what we're learning is that the heart center has a very specific electromagnetic frequency and resonance. And what is going on an electromagnetic level in your heart actually influences what you attract and experience in your life. Your solar plexus, your emotional energy, actually synchronizes with the electromagnetic attraction field in your heart. And it actually tells you, or actually attunes the vibration of this electromagnetic attraction field in the heart, and it will influence what you create or draw or attract into your life. So when we talk about the law of attraction in metaphysics, the law of attraction mechanically actually emanates from the heart. In human design, we talk about what's called the magnetic monopole, which is actually a magnetic force that resides within the heart. That magnetic monopole, or the electromagnetic attraction field in your heart, is regulated by your emotional vibration. And when you are using this emotional energy to synchronize and attune the center in the direction that you are wanting to create in your life, it actually causes you to attract really great and powerful things in your life. If you're not using your emotional energy correctly, especially if you're reacting and not being deliberate and not being conscious of what's going on emotionally, it can actually influence that electromagnetic attraction field in the heart, and it will influence what you end up attracting into your reality. So if you want to live a really great and powerful life, you want to live an amazing life, you've got to be keenly attuned to what's going on in your emotional energy and how is that emotional energy impacting your heart and what you attract into your reality. So when we talk about the solar plexus, we want to look at the two different ways that the solar plexus is configured. You're either going to have it colored in, defined, or you're going to have it white. And it's pretty much a 50-50 split in the population. So half of you are going to have this colored in or defined, and half of you are going to have this white. When you have a defined emotional solar plexus, you have within you your own inner emotional energy. It is sourced within you. It emanates from you. You radiate your emotional energy out into the world. The defined solar plexus, the colored in solar plexus, has two specific things that we have to talk about today. Number one, if you have that brown triangle on the right-hand side of your chart, if you have a defined solar plexus, you have to wait for clarity before you take action in your life. When you have a defined emotional solar plexus, you have innate emotional waves. Your emotions vary. You have moods that vary between melancholy, which is an internal creative process, and even hope or joy or happiness, whatever label you want to call it. All right. I like to use happiness because happiness, here's the thing. We have this obsession, at least in the Western world, with this idea of happiness. Happiness is not this static, consistent kind of plateau. We tend to talk about happiness as being, I'm going to get to being happy, and then I'm going to be happy, 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 happy all the time. Truth is, when we look at the human design chart and the blueprint for the energy configuration of the human experience, nobody is designed to be happy all the time. We are designed to be joyful, but joy is actually in the archetype of the human chart. Joy isn't actually an emotional energy. Joy actually happens when we have a lifetime of experiences and we achieve mastery in whatever it is we're here to be masterful in. And that's when we establish and experience joy. Joy comes from wisdom. I'm not going to say age, but we do get more joyful as we age, or at least the potential that we have for joy increases with age. I think that my young 20-year-old millennial children would say that's probably true. Joy has a little bit more of it's not a static quality because it's constantly evolving from experience and repetition, but happiness is not static. So when we talk about innate emotional waves, when you have a brown emotional solar plexus colored in on the right-hand side of your chart, you will have cycles in your life of happiness and you will have cycles of melancholy. And that melancholy is not bad, it's not negative, it's not darkness, it's just the other side of happiness. It's not even the shadow side. I don't want to call it that. It's two sides of the same coin. It's just the variability of emotional flow. And really, when I talk about emotional energy, I really talk about it in the context of being inward, quiet, still creative cycles and outward expressive creative cycles. Those inner low creative cycles are oftentimes experienced as melancholy, but they can be actually a really kind of cool thing. When you learn to make peace with your emotional energy, not resist it, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit, it actually allows you to be at peace and even enjoy the melancholy. People who are emotionally defined oftentimes really like those quiet inner creative cycles. I have a daughter, my middle daughter, who is very emotionally defined. She has all kinds of emotional energy in her chart. And she's a writer, she's an artist, she's a poet. She loves her melancholy, thrives on her melancholy. She says to me all the time, I love it when I'm depressed, Mom. I'm so much more creative. I don't get that, but that's the nature of that creative energy sometimes. So the defined solar plexus has innate waves, and it has 3 different kinds of waves. So let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of waves that you will experience if you have a solar plexus colored in or defined in your chart. The first kind of emotional wave is called the individual wave. The individual emotional wave tends to have more high highs and low lows emotionally. So if you have emotional definition and you have either one of these 2 channels colored in, and it has to be a channel, meaning it has to be the whole line, not just half the line. The whole line has to be colored in. And by the way, it can be black, it can be red, it can be black and red, it can be all red, it can be checkered. Doesn't matter if it's black, red, or checkered, or both, or all of the above. It just matters that it's colored in. So if you have the inner channel colored in, that's the second channel on the inside, the 1222, or the middle channel on the bottom, the 3955, either one of these channels or both of these channels, you will tend to have more emotional highs and lows that have a pattern of being high, really high, high highs, and low lows. By the way, individual creative energy is all about art and creativity. So when you think about the true archetype of the passionate artist, this is where that archetype lives in the chart. It's that energy of fiery passion and intense darkness sometimes with it, but it's not really darkness. It's just melancholy and creative energy. Poetry, music, artistic expression, creative articulation, romance, all of that lives in this particular stream of energy in the chart. But for all intents and purposes, for this particular webinar, I just want you to know that if you have any of these two gates, you have a tendency towards high highs and low lows. When you have these energies, when I do readings for people or when I work with people, when you have these two channels, I find that the emotional energy that you carry within your being, if you have either one of these two channels, tends to be a little bit more challenging than the other emotional energies because they can be a little bit more intense and a little bit more extreme. And as we go through the program, I'm going to talk to you about some strategies to gain some different understandings and learn some different meanings around these energies so that hopefully they won't be so painful for you and you can begin to work with them in a much more effective and healthy and vital way. The second emotional wave is called the collective wave. The collective wave is not nearly as difficult as the emotional wave. It has a slow ride up and then a deep plummet, and then you kind of start all over again. So it's kind of like a cogwheel train. You sort of go up, you kind of jog up a little bit, then you have a plummet, and then you start the upward slide again. The collective emotional wave is located in the 4130, which is the bottom outer channel connecting the brown square at the bottom and the brown triangle on the right, or the 3536, which is the outer channel connecting the brown triangle to the brown throat center. If you have either one of these two channels, and again, it has to be the whole channel colored in, you will have a collective wave, and your emotions will have sort of a slow rise, and then you'll find suddenly you wake up one day and go, I'm just really in a dark place, or I'm in a melancholic place, because we're not going to refer to it as dark. And then you'll begin again after that plummet, a slow ride up. So you will still have, just like with the emotional wave, pretty noticeable shifts and changes in your emotional energy. The third kind of emotional wave is what we call the tribal wave. The tribal wave tends to be small undulations. It does not have the extreme ups and downs or shifts that the individual or the tribal wave can. The tribal wave comes from these three channels, and again, you have to have a full channel, no gates. The full channel has to be colored in, so it will come from either the 4037, the 596, or the 1949. What happens a lot of times for people who have this kind of emotional energy in their chart is they oftentimes don't notice their emotional energy unless something happens in their relationships or happens with their loved ones. So if you have this energy, you might find let's say you break up with your boyfriend, or maybe your children are having a struggle or a challenge, or something's going on with your partner or your parents, you might find under those circumstances, you're going to really feel intense emotional energy. But other than that, you may not ever really notice that you have a lot of emotional energy within you. The thing to remember when we're talking about emotional energy is it is the energy that ultimately gives us the capacity to be deliberate versus reactive. Fear is rooted in instinct, and fear happens on the left side of the chart. Fear creates in us a fight or flight adrenaline response, and it's a response that ultimately causes us to react to our circumstances. The emotional solar plexus, because it has waves, it's actually an energy that requires time for clarity. when you are emotionally defined, if you have that brown triangle colored in, you need time to feel your way into your choices and your decisions. Things have to feel correct. They have to be energetically aligned. Your vibrational experience, if you want to get woo-woo with it, you have to be in the right vibration for the creative process. Because it takes time for clarity. If you have a brown triangle colored in on the right-hand side of the chart, it means that you are not, write this down because this is the most important thing for you to understand. You're not here to be spontaneous. You need time to feel your way into your choices. As such, when you're going through that time and you understand you have an emotional energy, it gives you a cognitive understanding of the fact that, okay, I need to sit with this process and experience it. It also allows you to use your mind and your imagination to stimulate specific emotional responses. And consequently, as a result of you holding a vision for what's right and good and correct for you, attuning your emotional energy to what's in your mindset, allowing that attunement or that synchronicity of what feels good and right for you to influence the heart, it allows you to actually slow down and let the universe or the outer world or the quantum field, whatever you want to call it, bring to you what you need to have and experience in order for you to get clarity about the decisions that you are going to make and need. So what we say in human design is that if you have a defined solar plexus, you need to sleep on your decisions. And what that really means is that for some of you, you can go to bed and really just give yourself 24 hours to feel your way in a choice, and that's correct. And if you get that inner click like, this feels right now, then do it. For some of you, especially those of you who have more intense emotional waves, it's like an individual wave or a collective wave, you need sometimes weeks for clarity before you make a big decision. I would certainly say if you have a defined solar plexus and somebody brings you a great big opportunity, do not leap into it spontaneously. Wait and feel your way into it. Because what happens a lot of times is when you have emotional energy and you are leaping into things and then your wave shifts as it will, you may find that you've leapt into a situation that felt good in the moment and then the next morning didn't feel so great. Let's think about it. I'm going to get juicy and racy here for a minute. Let's think about it in the context of sex and sexuality. Sex and sexuality is an energy that is emotional. It is an energy that by design needs to be weighted on for clarity. We are actually not designed to leap into bed with each other. We are designed to wait for clarity to make sure that the choice that we are making around our sex and sexuality is a deliberate and conscious choice. And if you think about it, makes total sense, right? Sex is a life or death kind of a choice. Sex has the potential to create life. It has the potential even for death. So if you're not being mindful of and deliberate and taking your time to make sure that you're engaging in a sexual relationship with great clarity, you are actually making a choice that's much healthier for you and much more in alignment with the clarity necessary for engaging in that degree of a big choice, all right? So bottom line here, if you're emotionally defined, take your time. Wait until things feel right before you jump into things. Here's the other piece. If you're emotionally defined, you may have trauma around some of the more spontaneous choices that you've made. I find that when I work with people who are emotionally defined, oftentimes they have a lifetime experience of having leapt into things and been super excited and enthusiastic about them and having these thoughts like, this is it, this is it, this is what I've been waiting for. And they get into it. And then a day or two later, they're like, oh my God, what have I done? I hate this. I thought I would love this. And it's just, I'm in it now. My energy's gone. I can't get up and go do what I need to do. I'm either going to have to break this commitment or I'm going to have to force myself to follow through on what I said I would do. And it doesn't feel right anymore. And they're confused. You might feel confused because it all felt so right 3 days ago and now you're in it and it doesn't feel right anymore. And you can't figure out how did you get from all this enthusiasm and excitement to going, I hate this. And you're not really understanding why this energy shifted. This is the reason why waiting is so important, because when you wait, you get to experience the full cycle of your emotional energy around your decisions, around your choices, and consequently, you can make your choices and decisions in a way that ensures that your energy is going to be more consistent, that you're commitment into whatever it is you're committing to is going to stay more steady and solid, and you're not going to be fighting yourself and fighting your own energy trying to keep up with something you jumped into spontaneously that now doesn't feel right. Emotional energy vibrates. It operates at a frequency, and it has its own emotional wave, literally. So if you're familiar with the energy or the science of vibrations, you know that vibrations travel in waves, sine waves. My joke is always, if you are a vibrational being. If you go to the hospital and they hook you up to the EKG and nothing's happening, they don't get a blip on the little screen, you're not vibrating, and then you're consequently dead, right? So we want to have vibrations. Vibrations are good. It's the indication that we are alive. And in fact, scientists can now actually measure the vibrational frequency of the universe, and what they've discovered is the universe itself, our little universe that we live in, actually has a pulse and a sine wave. So our universe is alive and its heart is beating, thank God, right? So emotions travel in waves. You have highs and you have lows. You have ups and you have downs. So you'll see on this particular graph here, you'll see there are undulations in the waves, all right? You'll also see in this graph, if you look down the middle where the 0 is, there's a baseline in this wave. The median range between these waves is called the baseline. Now, before I can talk to you about what to do with your emotional energy and how to work with it correctly, I have to shift gears a little bit and give you a little bit of foundation on what you can do to really manage your emotional energy well so that it doesn't kick your behind and it doesn't leave you depressed and it doesn't feel like it's struggling at all. So when you are working with your emotional energy, you have to first and foremost understand the nature and the time and the quality of your energy field. Okay? So the nature of your energy field is such that you have different layers or qualities of what's going on in your aura that will influence how you perceive and understand your emotional energy. Okay? So to heal or to change the way you process your emotional energy, you have to assign new meanings. But before we can talk about assigning new meanings to your experience, you have to first understand the full breadth of your emotional energy. So the first thing that influences your emotional energy is actually the experience of your physical body. Your physical body and what you're experiencing in your physical world are going to influence how you experience your emotional energy. Your conditioning, the pain, the experiences that you've had in your life, the traumas that you've had, the joys that you've had, the everything that's happened to you in your life are going to influence how you perceive your emotional energy. All right. So if you've had experiences where say maybe in the course of your life you were having big feelings, let's say you had a lot of joy in your life as a kid, and you came running into the house one afternoon and you started jumping around saying, "Woo, I had such a great day, yay!" And you were being all beautiful and vibrant and dynamic and joyful as a child can be. And your parents said, "Hey, be quiet. You can't do that in the house. You need to tone it down." And they told you to quiet down your emotions and didn't allow you to have the full range of expressions to your emotions. You may have learned to shut down your emotions. Let's say you had experiences where you experienced maybe the lower end of your emotional wave, and you started assigning meaning to that. You started to say, "I'm having these feelings because I'm stressed out in college," or "I'm having these feelings because nobody loves me," or "I'm having these feelings because I'm not comfortable in my body and I don't like my body. I'm having these feelings because, my parents didn't love me the way that I wanted to be loved." And so you begin to assign meanings to your emotions. In addition to that, the way in which we understand or experience our emotions is also influenced not only by our own experiences in this lifetime, the way in which you process and experience emotions is also influenced by your genetics, your family heritage, how your family managed and processed energies, even your parents' emotional energy design and their human design blueprint may have impacted or imprinted on the way in which you understand and process emotions. When you're not working with emotions correctly, when you have a meaning attached to those emotions that isn't vital and dynamic, that isn't helping you work with that energy in a way that's constructive and empowering and creative and juicy, it can actually cause you to look at your emotions with a negative perspective. And I'm going to explain to you in just a minute why that can oftentimes really impact us and hurt us, and actually cause us to experience struggles with emotional energy that can not only impact our emotional process, but also can cause us to manifest the negative implications of emotional struggles in our physical body. If you want to have a different experience with your emotional energy, and you want to have a healthy, dynamic, creative experience with your emotional energy, you have to define for yourself a new meaning and a new understanding of what that emotional energy is really all about. And let me explain to you why this is important, and then we'll go back to looking at how can you do this in a practical way. Human design has a component to it that is about quantum physics. This doesn't have to be even about human design. You can completely take the human design out of this part of this presentation and just listen to it from the context of your human experience. What we know from quantum physics is this. Quantum physics can only measure movement or location individually, not at the same time. So what we understand is that emotions are energy. They are energy in motion, literally. They are vibrational, and we don't know this yet, but it's quite possible at a certain point in time that we are going to discover that there's quantum movement associated with emotions. Emotions create and stimulate a whole range of physiological responses in the body. Those responses are actually triggered by photons, by light, which is a subatomic particle. The emotions that we are experiencing are triggered by quantum particles. So there's a quantum physics component to this emotional energy. You can only measure movement or location of quantum particles. If you're looking at a photon, let's say, which is a small particle of light, you can only measure the movement of the photon or the location of the photon. The minute you start measuring where that photon is located, you have to stop, or you can only measure the location, not the movement. It's kind of like this. The analogy that I like to look at is, or talk about, is if you've ever stood on a stool and had your grandma pin or hem your dress, if you're wiggling and you're wiggling away and the pins are sticking you, it's very difficult for your grandmother to locate the source of the hem, right? The minute you stop moving, then your grandmother can locate where the hem should be and pin you correctly, all right? The minute you the minute you start measuring location is the minute, movement contains potential, all right? Location is manifestation. So our emotional experience has a whole lot of fluidity and potential to it. When we go back and we talk about the emotional wave, it's a moving piece, okay? The emotional movement is fluid and it has movement to it. The minute we start assigning a meaning to our emotional experience is the minute we start moving from potential to location. And the minute we start to give it meaning, we actually begin to manifest the meaning of that emotion in our outer reality. Let's keep it simple. Here's some thoughts. Your consciousness actually mediates between mind and matter. All right? So consciousness, your state of being is actually mediating between your mind and your physical body. What maintains the parallel function of the mind and the brain? Consciousness. Therefore, your mind, and the meaning that you derive from your experience is vital for what you end up manifesting or what you end up creating in your reality. What that also means is that what you create and the meaning you assign it is going to be conditioned by your life experiences, or what we say in human design, your conditioning field. So everything you've experienced in life, let's keep this simple. Everything that you've experienced in life, all the pain that you've had, all the joy that you've had, all the trauma that you've had, all the excitement that you've had, the experiences that you had growing up, your genetics, everything about what is influencing your life right now, the sum total of all the choices that you made comprises what we call your conditioning field. If you want to create something different in your life, You have to give it a new meaning, and you have to align that meaning with what you really want to be experiencing. And of course, and this is the most important piece of it, when you observe something, when you look at something, and scientists know this, when we start to measure criteria, when we start to do any kind of a scientific study, when we observe it, it begins to change. Let's talk about, what does that mean? What does that mean in the context of emotional health and wellness? Okay, our perception of the world and the meaning we determine creates. Our perception of the world and the meaning determines what we create. Next slide. To change our reality or to change your emotional experience, you have to change the meaning you ascribe to it. And that's where real healing happens. So let's go back to our chart. To heal your emotions, you have to change, and you have to give your emotions a new meaning and new understandings. So let's go back to our chart with the emotional frequency. I'm going to put this into very simple practice now. Here we have our emotional frequency. Those of you who are emotionally defined, you have consistent emotional energy waves. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's a baseline frequency for your wave. Your waves also have what's called amplitude. So they have height, and that height is mirrored in the valley. So you have the peak of the wave and the low end of the wave, and then you have the baseline frequency. You're always going to have waves. As we said, if you don't have waves, you're dead, all right? But you can influence the baseline frequency and the quality of the waves in which you are experiencing. So if we go on to the next slide, you'll see that here at the top of this chart, we have what's called a low frequency wave. The word frequency comes from the number of undulations or the number of waves per minute. So in the top chart, we have a low frequency wave. It has only one frequency, right? In the entire span of a minute, it just has one undulation. Whenever we have a low frequency wave, it moves slowly. The experience of our emotional energy is slow. You may have a long time at the top and then a long time at the bottom. In the next slide, the next image, not the next slide, you'll see what's called a high frequency wave, okay? A high frequency wave has a lot of undulations, a lot of waves happening within the minute. Your experience between up and down and the amount of time spent in the up and down is short. So when you have a high frequency wave, you're really kind of only sensing or experiencing or feeling more of the baseline of the frequency, what goes down the middle, than the intensity of the long high and the long low. Here's why meaning and understanding becomes important in working with emotional energy. When you pay attention to something, when you notice something, when you start talking about something, when you give it attention and energy, quantum physicists talk about this all the time. The movement of quantum potential is influenced by attention and intention. When you start paying attention to something, it begins to become local. It has a location, and it begins to actually drop into your physical experience. When you have emotional definition, meaning when your solar plexus is colored in, and you go down to the bottom end of that emotional wave, if you go down to that bottom end of the wave and you're sitting there and you're saying, I hate my life, I feel miserable, I'm depressed, I'm so unhappy, and you're putting all of your energy on the low end of that wave, what happens is, because you're focusing on it, you're actually increasing the intensity of the low end of that wave, and you're bringing it down and more down and more down. And not only are you bringing it down, you're actually slowing down the wave so that the frequency of your energy movement, of your emotional wave, actually begins to slow down too. So you end up spending a longer, more difficult, challenging, and even deeper time on the low end of the wave. And actually what happens is you start to bring your baseline frequency down so that you start taking the happiness part of the equation out of the picture for yourself. So focus and attention and also meaning, and we are so conditioned to find meaning in our emotional energy. We are trained by psychology and psychotherapy, and this is not a slam on psychology and psychotherapy because they absolutely have their place. I'm not saying they're bad or wrong. I'm just saying that we are taught to go on a hunt for, why am I feeling this way? What's wrong with me? That's one of the big questions we always ask when we are feeling low in on our emotional energy. What's wrong with me? And the minute we start asking those questions, we're starting to place our attention on this low end of this energy wave. And as soon as we do that, we begin to drop the quality of the wave, drop the baseline frequency of the wave, and we get stuck in emotional energy that doesn't allow us to come back out and live out that high expression, that outer expression of that creative self. This is what happens to emotionally defined people. And consequently, it also ends up impacting the emotionally open people around you as well. We're asking the wrong questions. On top of that, we have a vocabulary problem with emotions. We tend to say, I am sad, I am happy, I am joyful, I am angry. We use the phrase I am with our emotions, and we begin to identify with it. And again, the minute we identify with it, we're putting attention on it and we drop it and fix it in our reality. You are not your emotions. There's no identity there. This is a flow of energy. You aren't being your emotions. Beingness actually happens in a totally different part of the chart. Who you be is stable and steady and steadfast. Beingness doesn't have that vacillating, undulating energy in it. The solar plexus, the emotional energy does, but your beingness doesn't. You cannot be your emotional energy. You are experiencing or feeling your emotional energy. The analogy I always use with my students is, think of a screen door. Okay? If you are a screen door and the wind is blowing through you, and you say, let's say the screen door has consciousness, you're the screen door and you say, I am the wind, you are completely mistaken, because the screen door is not the wind. The screen door is the screen door. The wind is the experience of energy moving through the screen door. It's really important for us to stay healthy emotionally, to not identify with our emotional energy, and to not fixate or pay attention or ask the wrong set of questions around the nature of the wave-like quality of our emotional energy. A couple of other just important pieces about the defined solar plexus. When you have a defined solar plexus, not only are you not designed to learn in the moment, you're actually also designed, let me take it back. When you have a defined solar plexus, not only are you not designed to act spontaneously in the moment, you need to wait for clarity. You also need time to integrate anything that you learn. So when you learn something new, if you're emotionally defined, you actually have to go through your whole emotional wave with that new body of information in order for you to integrate fully the learning that you've experienced. Same thing with memory. You may not fully remember an experience and be able to recount it and tell it until you've gone through your entire emotional wave. As I said, when you're emotionally defined, you have to live your human design strategy, meaning each energy type in the human design system. The human design system has 5 energy types. Each energy type has a different decision-making strategy. When you have a defined emotional solar plexus, when that triangle is colored in, it means that whatever your human design strategy is, according to your type, you have to make sure that you feel like the decision is correct for you over time. And let me illuminate that for you. If you're making an emotional decision, or rather, if you're making a decision and you are an emotionally defined person, you have to make sure that while you're waiting for clarity, you aren't changing your mind every 10 minutes while you're waiting. If I say, let's say somebody asks you to marry them, and you go in the moment, yeah, but you know, okay, I'm an emotionally defined person. I should wait for clarity. Before I accept this proposal, I should wait a little bit, feel my way into it. And while you're waiting, you're going, I want to get married to this person. And then, 10 minutes later, you're going, I don't really want to get married. I don't know what I'm thinking. Why am I thinking about getting married? Being married, that's the biggest mistake of my life. And then 10 minutes later, you're going, yes, we should get married. That's an awesome idea. I love this idea. I can't wait to have a wedding. And then, the next day you're waking up going, no, no, no. If you have that degree of variability over the course of your emotional wave, it's not the right decision for you. You have to feel that it's the good decision for you all through the emotional wave. And that's a really key thing to pay attention to, because it's not just about waiting while you go all over the place with your decision. If you're all over the place with your decision, it's not the right thing. If it's the correct decision, it's going to feel good to you all through the course of your emotional wave. One other thing to think about or to consider before we go on and talk about the open solar plexus, if you have a defined emotional solar plexus and it's connected to the root center at the bottom of the chart, the square at the bottom of the chart, when you go down on your emotional wave, it'll also turn off your adrenaline energy. So sometimes you might find when your wave goes down, if you have this particular configuration, sometimes your energy goes down too. And it's not personal, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that those two energy centers are connected and sometimes your energy actually goes away. Let's talk for just a minute about the other half. The other half is a little bit more simple. The open emotional solar plexus, if you have a white emotional solar plexus, it means you will be taking in other people's emotional energies and amplifying it. Because you feel feelings so deeply, what oftentimes happens with people with an open solar plexus is there is a tendency for them to avoid truth and conflict, all right? So if you have an open solar plexus, because you can feel people's responses to you standing up for yourself, you asking for what you want, you having to deal with something that's difficult or challenging in your relationships. When you come out as an emotionally open person and you present these difficult conversations, it actually can make you hold back and be nice and try to pussyfoot around dealing with the difficult conversations, or even, this is the part that gets really bad, even compromise on what's truth for you in the name of keeping everybody else happy. So really important when you have an open solar plexus to recognize that dealing with truth and conflict can be energetically a little bit more difficult for you, but important for you to do anyway, because whenever you compromise what you want, what's true for you, what's good for you, boundaries for yourself, even though it might make everybody happy in the short run, in the long run, that's going to cost you a lot of energy and ultimately impact your health. If you're not talking about how you feel and what you're feeling and what you need and want, and you're shoving that down inside of you, it's very easy for that to ultimately impact your body. When you have an open solar plexus, because you're experiencing everybody else's feelings amplified, sometimes you can have a lot of energy and flair for drama. You can be the one in the family that's the canary in the coal mine in the emotional department. You're expressing all the emotional energy in the family. This is oftentimes the kid in the family that's always blurting out all the emotions in the family. So the emotional solar plexus, and let me just be real clear, because people always say, well, does that mean I don't have feelings? Everybody has feelings, okay? But they don't necessarily have the emotional wave. And that's really exclusively what's located on the solar plexus. If you have a solar plexus open, you still can love, you still will grieve, you will still feel deeply connected to people, you will still feel excited, you will feel passionate, you still have emotions. It's just they don't originate from within you. And of course, the bigger emotions like love and connection and bonding, those energies are not connected to the solar plexus at all. Love comes from the heart, and that's in a totally different place in the chart. And we all have hearts, and we're all designed to love, and we're all designed to be connected with each other. What happens with the open solar plexus in the context of health and wellness is that we have a tendency to hold on to other people's emotional energies and store that emotional energy in the open solar plexus, and we don't release it, and oftentimes we feel responsible for it, because people who have an open solar plexus often feel responsible for keeping other people happy. And we hold on to emotional energy that we either don't express or that we've taken in from other people, and when we take that energy in and we hold on to it, and we become aware that we've been holding on to it, it often takes time. And it takes energy work to clear that energy out of your system so that you can get back to being the screen door and allowing the flow of emotional energy to flow through you, and for you to be able to go, oh, I'm feeling the sadness. Where is this coming from? Who around me is feeling sad? And understanding that a lot of the emotional energy that you may be experiencing in your life doesn't even come from you or isn't even generated from you, but it's energy that you're experiencing from the people around you. And for you to be able to ultimately, when this is open, to watch emotional energy, to see it, to witness it, to be present to it, but also not feel responsible for fixing it, because the nature of life is variability in the emotions. So from a solar plexus and healing perspectives, the solar plexus, as we talked about, can be associated oftentimes with depression. The World Health Institute actually ranks depression in its own category as being an illness that impacts people on a huge level, that is creating a global health crisis. I'm going to very gently say that one of the contributing factors, I'm certainly not going to say it's the only contributing factor, but one of the contributing factors, I think, is our lack of understanding about the nature of emotional energy and how it works. When we are not using emotional energy correctly, because this is so deeply associated physiologically with digestion and assimilation, we have a tendency to have food issues. Food issues are often an emotional issue. We also will see sometimes diabetes as being a an emotional issue. And of course, emotional eating, which can be food habits associated with stress or food habits associated with emotional pain, can be part of what we see when we have physical manifestations of challenges with emotional energy in the chart. One last thing to look at, an interesting thing to pay attention to. Just think about this. I'm just going to plunk this into your awareness to think about this. And if you haven't run the charts of the people in your house and the people you live with, I encourage you to do that. If you feel like you've got a lot of stuff going on with you and your emotions, first of all, check your own definition and see if perhaps over time you've learned different ways of using emotional energy that maybe are not supporting your full health and wellness. But I also want you to pay attention to who's open and who's defined in your household and who's around you. If you are emotionally open and you feel like you've got a lot of emotional struggles, I would gently encourage you to pay attention to who are you living with and how is somebody else's energy perhaps impacting your energy. If you're emotionally defined and you live with an open person, you might wonder, why is this person who I live with always so emotionally intense? Well, it might be that they are reflecting back to you your own inner emotional energy, and maybe that's something else for you to pay attention to too. So it's always fun to look at in your relationships who has which energy, and certainly when it comes to healing, health, and wellness, recognizing who has what kind of emotional energy in the context of the relationships is crucial for helping you understand how is this energy impacting you. So I hope that you've learned at least a little bit about your emotional energy and how you can maximize the use of your emotional energy, how you can understand it more deeply, how you can stop taking some of it so personally, how maybe perhaps some things you need to look at in terms of bringing out a more juicy, more rich, more passionate expression of your energy, how you can use it correctly to really create what you want in your life so you can really make sure that you're using your emotional energy to synchronize with your heart center so you can really create what you want. If you'd like to go deeper and understand a little bit more about your emotional energy, cultivate emotional wisdom, and look at how perhaps other factors in your energy field might be keeping you from allowing yourself to really express the full creative potential of your emotions, or how any other aspect in your chart might be keeping you from tapping into full health and wellness, maybe how other elements in your chart might be holding you back from creating what you really want to be creating in your life,